Everybody, thank you for joining us today. As Serena indicated, I'm Mike Erickson, and it's a pleasure to have you here. We hope to enlighten some dashboard techniques upon you and help you navigate through the BI dashboard jungle with some proven survival techniques that we've come up with. First of all, I'm a dashboard design specialist. What that means is my primary focus here has been about usability and experience with dashboards, as well as the overall aesthetic appeal behind it. Basically, the graphic design that you see on every dashboard. I've been an employee of Lancet since 2005. When I first started as a web and graphic designer, I feel that, especially with web design, it gives me a unique perspective in user interfaces and usability design. And I leverage that now into the BI realm in dashboard presentations. In Lancet, we are, if you don't know much about us, we're a BI professional services firm out of the Minneapolis metro area. And we've been doing business intelligence and reporting and analytics and dashboards for quite a while now. We've been in business since 1997. And lastly, I actually have a formal education too in graphic design. It's basically a life passion of mine. It's something I've done ever since I can remember, and I'm just fortunate enough that I'm here today and I can talk to you about it as a professional in the graphic design field. What you'll take away today, hopefully a deeper understanding of dashboard development, and that it's not just about the numbers, it's also about usability and overall experience for the end user, as well as the numbers. The numbers are the most important thing. I mean, you're supposed to be able to have actionable results from them, but the best way to do that is through a greatly conceptualized and designed dashboard. With that, we have come up with 10 proven survival techniques that we've adopted here at Lancet as our methodology, and also you'll have some useful resources to help you along the way. Now, before we really get into the nuts and bolts of the presentation, I think it's important we talk about and define what a dashboard actually is. And that I've come across a lot of definitions, and I've talked to quite a few people about it. And this particular definition by Stephen Dew, who is a fantastic author in visualization and dashboard design, he came up with this definition. And I want to highlight some of the salient points, as these points we'll be talking about throughout the presentation. A lot of them touch upon these 10 survival techniques. First off, it's the visual display. It has important information. Maybe the most important thing, it's used to achieve one or more objectives, goals, make sure it actually has a purpose. And also, a dashboard needs to be on a single screen and presented in such a way that the information you have can be monitored at a glance. Now, to get started on these 5 salient points, I think we start at the very first survival technique, and that's designing with purpose. Just like you wouldn't build a house without a blueprint, or go on a road trip without a few key highways that you want to take along the way, you wouldn't start a dashboard without knowing exactly what you're going to do. So to start off, you need to ask yourself, what is the goal of the dashboard? Who will use it? And what information do the users need? Again, like I said, you wouldn't build a house without a blueprint. You got to make sure you have a plan before any development begins. To do that, it's as simple as in your initial kickoff meetings to work with business leaders, to work with end users, and develop a set of objectives for the dashboard. And throughout the process, and throughout especially even the molding and the blueprint stage, have a reason for every design element you add, have a reason for every data element you add. Make sure that it adds to the value of the dashboard and doesn't detract from it. And also it needs to align with your objectives. Personally, what I like to use in my work is the 5 W's of journalism. Basically, you need to ask, who will be using the dashboard? What will the dashboard be used for? Where will the dashboard be used? How often will it be used? And why do they need a dashboard? For purposes of this presentation, we've come up with a fictitious company that we're going to use, and we're going to have them go through these 10 survival techniques. And this particular company is called Widgets Incorporated. They're a high-end retail store, and do so on a regional level. Where will the dashboard be used? We talked about web and desktop use. So we'll be doing a lot of our work, through a browser or through an email attachment, basically. And when we're doing monthly data loads, so the category manager will be checking at the very least end of the month to see their previous month's stats, as well as they'll probably be checking it throughout the month a few times just to touch up and make sure they know what's going on. Why do they need a dashboard? Like a lot of customers that we've run into, they need dashboards because maybe they have all this data and maybe it's at many different focal points. And the whole point is they need a single center of focus. So we want to make sure that we give them a single deliverable that they can access the stats, access the reports, and know what's going on, where they don't have to go through multiple spreadsheets, different PowerPoints. They don't have to go to a website to see what's going on. They just have one source of information. After we have our blueprint, we want to make sure that we're planning for all devices, whether it be desktop and web use, or now a big hot button thing with mobile device, and mobile consuming of business intelligence information. Whatever we decide to do and however we decide to do it, we want to make sure that we plan for the right devices. You need to ask yourself, how will the users interact with the dashboard? You might interact with it differently on the web versus on a mobile device. What browsers and applications does the design support? Sometimes you're not going to have the same design isn't going to work sometimes with a web use versus maybe a phone use. So you want to make sure that you keep that in mind. And how will it translate to mobile devices? Kind of touching on what I said in the previous 2 points. So for this sake, for this presentation, since we discussed that we're doing it on web and desktop use, we're doing it for a computer monitor. And the tricky part with designing for end users and that have different monitor resolutions is it's hard to come up with a common or single resolution design for. But in the design world, we call this designing for the lowest common denominator. Doing some research, I was able to find out that in total, in 2010, 96% of Americans have a monitor resolution at or greater than 1024 by 768. If you can't talk with your end users or get a clear definition of what the end user's monitor resolution is going to be, this is probably a good starting point. This is the absolute minimum, maybe sometimes even maximum that you can do for a resolution. So knowing that, we need to do about our dashboard size about 93% of our monitor resolution. Why 93%? If you really think about a browser window or an application window, you have to deal with a lot of things at the top of the window, whether it be an address bar or bookmarks, links, things like that. They take up screen space. You have a limited amount of space to work with, and now with the constraints of a web browser or application, you have even more to work with, even less to work with, even more constraints. So give or take, and you might have to play with that figure, it's about 93%. So in this case, that's about 960 by 714 pixels. So you might ask yourself, a lot of these business intelligence programs, they work specifically with inches and not pixels. So what does 960 pixels even mean? Most the business intelligence programs, and especially MicroStrategy, they use a default resolution of 96 pixels per inch. So doing some simple math, you just take the total amount of pixels you want, divide it by 96, and you get the rough inches. So in this case, our dashboard is going to be 10 inches by 7.4. Now, that's a small dashboard, and if you've done a lot of dashboard work, maybe yourself, you know that most cases you're designing for probably your canvas size is 11 inches by 8.5. Oftentimes on smaller monitors, you're running into scrolling. Sometimes on bigger monitors, you just have this huge white space. That's part of the challenge with this design, especially with web and desktop. So if you can't get a specific number, you're just going to have to guess. And I would start at 1024 by 768 as the monitor resolution, which would be about 10 inches by 7.44 specifications guide and an overall dashboard design guide that we've come up with. And this dashboard survival guide is basically the 10 points we're talking about today. It's a free download. I recommend that you do it. It's an entirely educational piece. Download it, forward it to your friends. I think you'll find it useful. You can do that at lancetsoftware.com/dashboard. You'll see all these points we're talking about today, some great before and after examples, some good resources, books, websites, things like that. So be sure to check that out. Our third survival technique is sticking to the brand. Large corporations especially, but even small businesses, they probably spend time and even a lot of money developing a brand that's unique to them, with colors and logos and fonts, things like that. To a corporation who's probably spent maybe millions of dollars making a brand visual identity that shows exactly who they are. So the blue in their logo isn't just an ordinary blue you pick out. It's a very specific blue. And it's important that you utilize that in your own dashboard development. So knowing that, ask yourself, what elements are key to the company's visual identity? Are the fonts and images and logos consistent across the dashboard? And are design elements you're using, are they in line with current corporate brand? So to get started, I think the most important thing you can do, and it's very simple, is just starting by reviewing the company website. Hopefully they have a good one, and hopefully it really reflects their brand and identity. You can also ask for brochures, sell sheets, any other collateral that has unified look and style. Especially the bigger businesses, I guarantee you they have these things, but even small ones have their own unique identity. So be sure to use this. Chances are the work's already done for you. You just need to do some research. You can communicate with the company's marketing or communications team. They will have all this collateral for you. They also have logos, fonts, specific color values that you can use in your dashboard. Be sure to take advantage of this because it's, again, the legwork is done. You just have to put it in. It's pretty simple. You can also use auto-formatting and graph templates for easy brand implementation. Many business intelligence reporting software, they have these types of functionality. MicroStrategy does for sure. Where we've gone in, Lancet has gone into a customer site and we built a gamut of different graph types and different grids, and we built formatting and we built templates so that even if we left and a person with absolutely no design experience, they could go in and they could select a graph template, a grid format, and they can make any dashboard they make after we leave look exactly or even better than what we did to begin with. Now, we want to get into the empowering decisions part. This is talking about the most important part of the dashboard, the data. Is your data actionable? Can users actually make sense of it and do something about it? So you need to ask yourself, can users of all levels find information quickly, intuitively? Are menu choices and drill down options obvious? And is the information logically structured and clearly labeled? I want to show you a dashboard that we've been working on with Widgets Incorporated, and throughout the iterative process, we've landed on this. Again, so we're measuring category performance, and you can see we have 4 quadrants, but it's not really sure what we're looking at. We see a grid, that has what looks like, I guess, category and some key metrics there, but the graph to the right of it, even with the legend, it's hard to read. It's hard to actually see what we're reporting on. These grids, they're lengthy, they're a mess. It's not exactly clear. So this information, no doubt, is valuable, but it's not presented in such a way to actually empower a user to make a decision. So what we can do, a couple little quick tricks that we can do is first off, make sure that we clearly label what each of these data elements are, these grids and these graphs, so that even a person, even a category manager, even whether it's a category manager or whether it's a guy up the street, they can look at the dashboard and say, okay, this top left is key performance indicators because it says so. And this top right graph is metrics on a certain category just because it says so. So we'll want to add titles, and we want to make sure that we're not reporting redundant metrics in similar fashion. It's okay to show the same metrics, but in different ways. We just want to make sure that we're not doing it repetitive. So what we want to do with this top right graph is we are showing revenue and profit margin, and last year's revenue, but some of these metrics are redundant. However, one thing that this particular graph does have that would be valuable is last year's revenue when compared to this year's revenue. So we're going to change that graph type, and we're going to just report those two metrics, and it gives us a totally different view of the dashboard. And we'll see it here. Again, just by adding some titles and changing some of the metrics around, we've now made this a little bit more usable. We've made it a little bit more actionable, so the user doesn't have to spend minutes or longer of their time trying to figure out what's going on, rather than being able to quickly log on and see a picture, graphic representation of the data. So to recap, your dashboard should be intuitive. No training should be required. So again, anybody should be able to, not that you want anybody to see your dashboard, but anybody should be able to see it and know what the data means. Volumes of data should be presented at a glance. You use different graphs, use different grids, segment the data, and to provide unique perspectives. You also want to assign a label to each graph and grid, just to make it obvious that that's what you're looking at. And your key items should be obvious and apparent. Key items being your alerts or KPIs. They should be in an obvious point of the screen, and they should be the first thing a user looks at. You also want to maintain a consistent structure and layout for all the dashboards that you design. What this does is it's kind of a smart thing. If you have a multitude of dashboards, I'd say even 3 or more, if you have the KPIs, your key performance indicators, in the top left of every dashboard, and you have, revenue or profit margin, a particular graph on the right side in every dashboard, a user will be able to go to dashboard and know where to look right away and know what to expect. So it subconsciously trains them, and I think it's important to take advantage of that aspect. Now, our fish survival technique is, once we have the data being empowering to us, once the data means something, we want to maximize the space that we have. Again, our dashboard size is so small that we want to make sure we take advantage of what little space we have. So ask yourself, how much detail is absolutely essential in the dashboard? Are you showing too much? Are you showing too little? What is the primary focus of the dashboard? And can multiple items be served with one label or menu? Basically, maybe you have 2 graphs that are closely related. Do you need to see both at the same time? Or is it more valuable to maybe put them within a panel stack where you can toggle back and forth and see the 2 and do 2 different views? So to get started, to maximize space, I think the easiest thing to do is make sure that the font sizes are at an appropriate size where they're legible, but they don't take up so much real estate. I think these titles, the KPIs, category revenue this year versus last year, these titles are I wouldn't say too big, but they're bigger than they need to be. The whole point is to have the font legible while being a small size. So typically what we found is that your typical size might be 8 to 11 points. Now that doesn't seem like a lot of leeway, but there is a big difference between an 8-point font that you're using in a grid versus an 11-point font that's bolded, maybe a different color that you're using as a title. Just by using things like white space and contrast, you create a lot more of a difference in look than you think you do in just 3 font sizes. Also, we want to maximize space in that the top left of the screen is probably the most important part of the screen. It's where the user will subconsciously look first. Think about when you're viewing a website or anything else in that matter, on a computer especially. You're going to gravitate to the top and you're going to gravitate to that left corner because that's where it all begins. So your human eye movement goes left to right, top to bottom. easiest way that it's still the title. And what we'll do is we'll quickly just move up, resize the logo, and we'll resize the actual title of the dashboard, and we'll move it to the bottom right of the screen. Sometimes you have to really convince the customer that this is the right move. They might not agree with you, but explain them in such a way where the data is the most important part of the dashboard. You know, the title of the dashboard and the company logo aren't the most important, and chances are the end user actually already knows whose dashboard it is and what the dashboard is, because they probably clicked on it or they opened an attachment, so they should already know. So there's no point in showing things that the user already knows. The whole point is showing them things they need to know, need to learn. So again, let's review really quickly here. Take time to review and tighten every element. You have such limited space, such limited pixels, you don't want to waste it on things that don't add any value. Also, a nice little trick is truncating figures to the shortest suitable format. Don't use a thousandth place when a tenth place will do. Also, maybe all your figures on your dashboards are in millions. You know, maybe you just need to show one figure or a figure in a decimal place, and then denote as such throughout the dashboard that everything is in millions. This will save you a lot of horizontal space. It'll look a lot better if you're not shrinking everything to the smallest. Font sizes, again, 8 to 11 points. You kind of have to play with your customers at that. Some customers are going to have old eyes and they're going to need larger than 11. But typically, we found out that's a good range. The whole point is to be smallest while maintaining legibility. And like I talked about with the logo and the dashboard title, you don't want to minimize it, or if the company's cool enough, they understand exactly what you're doing, you can eliminate it altogether. But I think minimizing is probably good enough. Again, the user already knows what the company the dashboard is for, and they already know what the dashboard is. Now, our sixth survival technique is applying the power of one. What that means is we want to make sure that everything is at a single focal point and that we have one source of information. So does your critical information fit easily on one screen? Can users view the entire picture, the entire dashboard, the whole visual entity without having to scroll? And what information are you showing that can be relocated to a drill down category? There's a constant battle and back and forth between what's enough and what isn't enough. A lot of times you're seeing data that has months and months of data on, you're reporting, on a monthly level, 3 different attributes and 5 different metrics in a grid. Well, that's really valuable information to know maybe at one point, but as an overview or an initial stage, is that much necessary? Maybe not. So you need to ask yourself if that is critical. And if it's not, maybe we can drill to it. So with that being said, these grids are exactly that. We're showing on a monthly level category and subcategory performance, revenue, profit margin. So yes, this data is important. Same thing with the supplier performance. But do we need to show all this right now? Probably not. But what we can do to make this a lot more easy to navigate, a lot more easier to read, is we can add filters, a selector control that allow us maybe to break down the grids and graphs on a certain attribute, a certain dimension. And if you remember initially, we discussed that the whole purpose of this dashboard was for the category managers to see category and subcategory performance on a regional level. So maybe adding a region filter would make more sense. And then maybe even a category filter would also make sense. So knowing that, that's exactly what we did. We now have a category filter, a selector control, and a region selector control that filters the data in a very specific fashion, but also in a logical sense. So now we can compare or just look at specific regions and specific categories. Doing that, because I'll go back to this original dashboard here, because we were showing all the categories in this top right graph, a category filter, we can change the graph type and we can change the size of the graph and how much space it takes. Since we're only showing one category at a time, it makes sense maybe to do, in this case, a horizontal bar graph to show this year's revenue versus last year's revenue. And we can see that in every region, we can see that in each category, and it's a much better way to view the information. And knowing, too, in the same fashion that a logical way to break down these data grids wasn't maybe in a monthly fashion. So now we're showing monthly data for each category in each region. Now, just by adding a few very simple filters, you can see how much of a big difference it was in screen space and how much information we're showing in the same amount of space. So playing with things like that, that's important. It's important to remember that everything should be at a single focal point, and that we don't want to scroll on the dashboard. Scrolling should be the biggest no-no. There's a disconnect the user has if they have to view one piece of information, scroll to the right especially, or scroll down and see another piece of information that's related and correlated with one another. They should be able to see that in the same view just by viewing, with their eyes, not having to scroll. Exactly what I was saying. Conclusions forms are much easier to make when the data is at a single focal point. Another way to attack those bottom data grids, instead of doing it on a monthly filter, we could utilize drilling as well. Maybe we can select those particular categories and see all the month's performance for that category. We want to make sure that we're not showing so much data where it overwhelms the user. We just want to show them enough. New selectors, filters, basically allows you to segment the data in a logical fashion, and it can be very specific and creative in how you do it. So really, to one degree, it's up to your imagination to filter it in a certain way. So play around with it and make sure that that you're doing it in a logical fashion. Our seventh survival technique is making sure that once we have the data at a single focal point, that it's actually arranged in a logical fashion. Can the users find your key performance indicators right away? Is there a planned sequence to the flow of information? And are like elements designed consistently, and are like elements grouped together? Like elements, when I say that, I mean, do graphs look the same? Are they using the same color scheme? Are grids using the same colors? Are grids using the same formatting? We want to make sure that these things look alike, and it's kind of related to the third survival technique in that we're sticking to the brand as well. And we want to make sure that, too, it makes more sense to have graphs grouped together and grids grouped together. So there's something about viewing a grid, it's about the numbers, it isn't about the visual representation of numbers, it's just the raw data. It doesn't make sense to see a visualization, then see raw data, and a visualization, raw data, especially when they're not related. It might be one thing to compare a graph and a grid of the same exact information side by side. That can be an interesting way to do it, but different sets of information in different ways, you don't want to do that. You want to make sure that graphs are together, grids are together. So, knowing those three questions, I want to look at this dashboard we've been working on and ask ourselves, is this dashboard doing those three things? Can the users find the key performance indicators on these KPIs? I think yes. I think it can also be doing a better job. It is at the top left of the screen, but it isn't it doesn't really stand out above everything else. I mean, the first thing I'm seeing is this big graphic graph. So we can do a better job, but I think we're at a good start. Is there a planned flow of information? Basically, does it make sense that our top level selectors are here, very top? Does it make sense to go from key performance indicators, category revenue this year versus last year, all the way down to our monthly selector and see the monthly category performance and the monthly supplier performance? I think this arrangement makes sense. In fact, I really can't think of a better way to arrange just these four quadrants of information. So again, as you go through your design and your dashboard, kind of evaluate and be objective. Does it make sense that navigate around this dashboard and know exactly what you're looking at without having to think. But a person who opens it up for the first time might not have the same experience. So call a friend, use a referral, a trusted colleague, anybody. They can give you an honest opinion on it.
Or an end user.
Especially an end user. They're the ones who are using it. They probably can give you the most insightful information. So again, we want to make sure that we understand natural eye movement goes from left to right, top to bottom. So most important information should be at that top left. What is the next logical piece of information should be to the right of that, so on and so forth. Again, your KPIs probably should be on probably your most important pieces of information. Not always. That's kind of up to you and the business leaders and the end users to figure out what is the most important information. But whatever it is, use the top left of the screen. Again, group like displays of information together, graphs together, grids together, and place non-essential items in visible areas, but in areas that aren't the most prominent. And by that I mean non-essential items are, again, your dashboard name, your dashboard title, company logo, company name. These could be at the footer of the document, or two, kind of a nice little trick I learned. If you think about maybe browsing a website, again, you're going to focus on the top part of the screen, especially the top left. You tend to avoid the top right of the screen, at least initially, and you tend to avoid the information on the right. Why? You've been around enough, you've seen enough websites where you just happen to know subconsciously that that's where advertisements are, and that's just where not the most important pieces of information are. So maybe a good compromise is if the customer doesn't like their name and the logo at the bottom of the screen, maybe you can move it to the top right. It won't be the first thing they see, and it certainly won't distract them initially. So as long as it's not ridiculously huge or has 70,000 different colors in it, I think that's a good compromise. Put it in the top right of the screen. Our eighth survival technique is making sure that we keep it simple. Simplify, simplify, simplify. Everything that's simple is an example of great design. And that's what we want our dashboard to be. We want it to have a great design, great experience. Do that, it needs to be simple. So, is the information the most prominent part of the design? Do colors and visuals overpower, or do they support the intake of information? And can any design elements be removed without impacting the overall focus? Now, working with Widgets Incorporated, they have a very particular branding image, as we discussed. So we want to make sure we work that in. Now, iterative process, we've arrived on this dashboard. There's a lot of fight and give and take with this whole dashboard title and the Widgets Incorporated logo. You can see at the top, it's very prominent. We want to make sure we bring that down. But we also want to work in an important image that they have that's part of their brand, part of their culture. They have this photograph of their flagship store. It's a nice photo. It's high end. It's modern looking, and the colors are nice and vibrant. It's moving. But the thing is, you don't want to just take this photo and put it in the background of this dashboard. One, because of probably the color combinations and the fact that this is just a very specific image with details like lights and people and stores. It would just take away from the most important part of the dashboard, and that's the information that you're seeing. So what we did is we worked with Widgets Incorporated, and we just dropped down the transparency to about 20%, so that it's there, we're still using it, but it's not going to detract from the information we're showing. And just by doing that simple trick, we put it in the background, and now we have this kind of this new depth and new feeling of the dashboard. It's not just a plain, boring white dashboard with information on it. We have something that actually means something. We can play around with design a little bit more. We want to make sure that we do keep it simple and make sure we focus on the information. So, powerful dashboards have great design, and that great design is subtle and it's not overwhelming. I'll give you an example. Think about maybe absolutely painless and you're able to figure it out, that's an example of great design. But you don't know it's great design because it's just, you just go with it and it doesn't feel like anything. The only time you feel bad design, or design I should say, is when it's bad. And then it's a bad experience. It's frustrating. So the flip side of that coin is you sit up, you get this phone and you can't figure out how to send 10 friends a text message. That's an example of horrible design. So if your end users especially are navigating the dashboard and they're asking you, you know, this doesn't make sense, why is it this way? You know you have some work to do, and you know you can simplify it even more. You also, to help keep it simple, you want to use design elements that support the information, not take away from it. Again, that image we added, I wouldn't say it supports the information. It does support the Widgets Incorporated branding image, but it doesn't take away from the information, which is probably the most important thing. It enhances the visual experience more than anything. Now, we got two more survival techniques, and this ninth one is diagramming wisely. And what that means is we want to make sure that all the different tools we have in our BI toolbox, we want to make sure we're using the right one for the job. You know, we're using the right graph type for the information, and we're using grids when it's appropriate to use grids. So, ask yourself if the visualizations are used appropriately. Could another approach better present the information? And do you have a clear and compelling rationale for each visualization choice you use? Now we're going to look at this dashboard again with Widgets Incorporated. We incorporated that background image. We have our category and region selectors here at the top that drive everything. But I think this pie chart is a curious choice, especially when we look at the movies or even music category level. We're seeing 6 very similar values, and even if it wasn't for the values in the pie, I think it's still hard to determine what your top performing is, especially with the color combination you're using. It's important that you don't use colors that clash together. To avoid that, don't use very vibrant colors, especially on pie charts when they're going to be next to each other. You can see that this red, even though it's only 1 percentage point higher than the blue color, it kind of overwhelms it. It kind of takes over, it absorbs it. And I think, you know, it's tough to tell, even with this 18% in orange and being the same as 18% in the blue and green, it actually looks bigger just because it's the first thing you see, or maybe the second thing you see. So, 2 things wrong with this pie chart for 6 very similar values, or pie chart to show 6 values in general is not a good way to go. You generally want to do 3 or fewer with a pie chart. And if you're going to use a pie chart, make sure you use a more subtle color palette and colors that don't jar with each other, that don't clash with each other. So, knowing that, it's a very simple fix. We worked with the end user, the category manager, and we wanted to make sure that we're showing this information in such a way where you know, it makes sense to them. And they didn't really care about the specific values of each slice of each category. All they really cared about was just that they could rather quickly see what is the best performing subcategory in the category dimension. So knowing that, all we did is we changed the graph type to a horizontal bar chart, and we listed the subcategories here. We're not showing any values. If you need values, you can hover over it. But again, it's a quick visual representation where you can see what is the best performing and the worst performing subcategory. So we'll go to the music one so we can compare apples to apples here. You know, even it's a little easier to tell that country music is your top performer here. Maybe to make it more obvious, if you're going to nitpick, you could maybe arrange these bar charts by highest percentage to lowest percentage so that it goes down. That's probably even a better way to do it quickly at a glance. But no doubt, an improvement and a rather quick improvement just by doing a couple key steps. So, to summarize, use the right tool for the job. You know, there's a million different graph types that you can have, and we have grids as well. You want to make sure that you're using the right one for the information that you're showing. And, it's a common question we get, what do I use for what? Truth be told, you probably can use a combination or several different graph types for a set of information. It's about personal preference, it's about what's appropriate for the dashboard. It's about maybe balancing what you're already using, keep it consistent. If you're using a lot of bar charts and they make sense, don't be afraid to keep using them. But the important thing is we don't want to add a variety, a whole spectrum of graph types on the dashboard just because we can do that. It's distracting, it's not tasteful, it's just not good design. So have a reason.
We have some suggestions in the survival guide for what to use
Correct.
when, right?
Correct.
Yep.
And that survival guide we talked about can be downloaded at lancetsoftware.com/dashboard. We talk about diagramming wisely, and we have specific examples of when to use a bar chart, when to use a line graph, when to use a gauge or a thermometer, heat map, things like that. There are very specific ways you can use them that they're intended for, but in many ways you can use multiple areas. So you need to kind of balance with it, play with it, see what makes sense, and a lot of it comes with experience, no doubt. But a lot of it too is simple. Again, use a subtle color palette. We don't want to use highly saturated colors, especially when they're together and clashing against one another. You might ask, Mike, you talked about using brand imagery for the company you're working for. What if they have bold colors and vibrant colors? I guess the best way I would do that is maybe you can use their bold colors as a highlight point. Maybe you want to use that for a very specific metric, a very important metric. But otherwise, chances are, especially with large companies, they have bold colors, but they also have a alternative, more subtle, I wouldn't say grayscale, but a lot more lighter color scheme that they can use as well. So if you're having trouble working with highly saturated colors for a customer, see if you can work with their marketing team, in the best case world. But otherwise, you can still always dim it down if you need to. And lastly is survival in numbers. We want to make sure we work as a team and we involve others. This whole presentation with Widgets Incorporated, it was done by a report developer, a guy who's certified and understands business intelligence, analytics, and he worked in tandem with a graphic designer, me. So we found out here at Lancet that this team approach is basically a great way to crank out dashboards, and not just great working dashboards, but great looking dashboards that also work. So it's kind of a dashboard factory, and we've found out that this is what works, and this is why we're here talking to you about it. So hopefully you can kind of even work that into your own work and maybe for your customers, team approach. So knowing that, ask yourself at the end of the project and throughout the project, does your dashboard meet business objectives that you set initially? Can users navigate effectively? And lastly, is there design assistance required? You need to polish up this dashboard. So what we want to do is we got to this point, this whole dashboard, and it looks okay, except for the colors. I think it looks okay, but we can do a little bit better job too. Again, the most important thing is that we're showing the information in a great way. I think we did that. Now let's see if we can just polish it up. So I took my experience in dashboard design and in web design and overall graphic design, and I took all this information here and made it look like this. Now, it's kind of it seems like an overwhelming change, but it's nothing's different. Nothing really changed in terms of information. It's the presentation change. Now, a little bit more obvious that you're looking at KPIs or you're looking at different segments of information, whether it be revenue by subcategory, monthly revenue and profit trends, because it's encapsulated, it's enclosed, it has obvious titles, and it's just a little bit better than here. Even though these titles are bigger, take up more space, I still feel it's a little more obvious that it's segmented in this fashion. So it's actually a working dashboard. I took that mock-up in just about a day's worth of work, got it approved, and went into MicroStrategy, and I was able to build it out into this working dashboard. And it does exactly what this previous dashboard did. It just looks different. So team approach is probably the way to go if you have access to a graphic designer. Definitely take advantage of it. We do it here at Lancet, and we believe it's really paying off. And our customers especially are loving the output that they get from it.
Yeah, and with that team approach too, it's not just, the Lancet resources, it's the business leaders and the end users from the clients that we work with that play a large role in the success of our dashboard as well.
Absolutely. So, creating a dashboard is a process. There's going to be iterations, many iterations through its life cycle. There's going to be milestones. So you want to make sure that by involving others that you're going to be embracing constructive criticism, especially, not afraid to push the envelope or bend over backwards sometimes to make things happen. You also need to know when to push back a little bit. You are the BI practitioner. You're the professional. Sometimes they rely on your expertise. Sometimes they're going to ask for things, and maybe it's a little bit unrealistic, out of scope. There's a lot of give and take. Don't be afraid to push back, and at least be professional about it and say, hey, that's possible, but here you go. And sometimes business leaders especially, they might not understand the work behind it, but they might understand the dollar figures behind the work. So just be upfront, professional about it, and I think it'll work out. Consult with peers. I kind of touched on this before. Working with a dashboard, working with data, you're probably so into it, it's very easy for you to understand what you're looking at, but it might not be easy for the end user. So it's important to ask people to weigh in on designs, test prototypes throughout the iterations, throughout these milestones, because what you might find out is surprising, and you might find some red flags that you weren't seeing, but because you asked questions and you asked somebody to take a look at it, it probably saved you hours of work down the road. We've heard from people many times that they heads down into a project for even months, and they delivered it, and the end users, even though it's iterative, the end users said, what is this? It doesn't make sense for it this way, and they had to review everything. So that's kind of what you want to avoid. And lastly, consult a graphic designer, because as you saw in those examples, they can just add a professional and polished touch to it. And they can provide assistance with layout and usability. They can, with your peers, they can weigh in on the usability, test drive prototypes for you, and help you with just a good overall design approach. Those are our 10 survival techniques. We provide, again, a link at the end of this so that you can download the dashboard survival guide. But otherwise, I want to hand it off to Serena here for a little bit, just to talk about who we are at Lancet and what we do.
Well, thanks, Mike. So we're a little bit over on the time that we anticipated, so I will be really brief. We hope that you guys enjoyed Mike's presentation. That was actually the first time that I've seen it, and I really enjoyed it. So we are Lancet Software. We've been doing this for about 13 years. We have about 40 MicroStrategy certified practitioners. We also have Mike on staff, who is a formerly trained graphic designer. So if you guys are, whether you have dashboard needs for internal purposes, just to monitor your internal operations for sales revenue, or you're creating dashboards that are being kicked out to your customers, you're providing that as a service, we can help you polish your dashboard or create them from scratch. So if this seems overwhelming to you guys, feel free to reach out to us. We'd be happy to connect with you, come out on site and just talk about what your goals are and get some numbers in front of you and see if you'd like us to help.
Good. If you have a unique challenge, I'd be glad to weigh in any way I can. Again, you can download this dashboard survival guide online at our website, software.com/dashboard. It's free, entirely educational. It covers everything we talked about today, as well as some other things. So be sure to check that out.
One real quick note: if you guys would prefer a physical copy of the survival guide, why don't you email Mike and we will mail you one. So it looks like we have a couple questions in the queue that we're going to try to get to. While Mike pulls that up. Okay. So we have, can we make a bar graph if last year value is greater than 40K? Can we change the color of the bar as green?
So conditional formatting on a bar graph, basically. I'm not really sure. I think it obviously matters what platform you're using. I know you obviously can in a grid format. I don't think you can actually do conditional formatting, at least within MicroStrategy, on a graph. So, to answer that, probably not. But again, depends on your platform you're using. So, but I know you can for sure in a grid.
We can look into that further and get a definitive answer and email you back.
Sure, absolutely. So, what else do we have?
Looks like we have one question. Do you use animated transitions in your dashboard work, or have you ever?
Okay. So, talking about, viewing maybe a dashboard and you have, let's just say, 4 different graphs. Maybe it's easiest to kind of look at a working example. Go to that here. So if I select from books to electronics, is there an actual? You can see that the information changes, obviously, but I think they're asking if it changes smoothly, where you actually can see it morph into one way or the other.
Yeah, I think that's more prominent on the mobile app.
I think so, and it's a good question. I guess it's personal preference, and it depends on the end user as well, what they prefer. The valuable thing about morphing is you actually can see the physical change between one set of metrics to the next. So it's all about personal feel and touch, but I would definitely recommend it if you do want to see that visual representation of what it's like to change.
Okay, it looks like we probably have time for one more question. We have thought, are there any recommended books or websites that you have found extremely useful that you could pass along to attendees?
Okay. Yeah, actually, I talked about them kind of at the beginning of the presentation. Stephen Few wrote a book called Information Dashboard Design. He is an industry standard. He is the industry leader in dashboard visualization or information visualization. I would definitely check out anything he's written if you're interested in knowing more about how to represent data. Again, that book was Information Dashboard Design. There's also another good book that we like to talk about here at Lancet. It's called Performance Dashboards. That's by Wayne Eckerson. He also writes great books on information dashboard design and business intelligence. And again, that's Performance Dashboards by Wayne Eckerson. So I guess that would be the ones where I'd start. Websites, it's a little trickier. I run into a website called dashboardspy.com. They have a lot of examples of different dashboards, and they're not platform specific by any means, but maybe if you're looking for a unique way to tackle a manufacturing dashboard, they have all sorts of examples that can kind of get you started. Maybe I would check that out. And otherwise, just Google it. That's what we do for sure.
The answer.
Yeah.
Okay. So it looks like, we're just about done here. So if you think of any questions after the fact, feel free to email Mike. We're happy to get back to you. And again, we appreciate we had such an overwhelming response to this webinar and to the survival guide at MicroStrategy World and since. We really appreciate it. again, feel free to reach out to us at any questions